In this episode, I speak with the wonderful Jessi Jean, food freedom coach and host of the Dear Body podcast. Jessi turned her decade long struggle with food and body into her mission, and now she helps women all around the world end the fight with food and find confidence in their skin so they can live in freedom. And of course, feeling good about who you are, feeling free in your life is what we're all about here at the Anxiety Reset podcast. Jessi started out as a cheerleader and a gymnast, and that slowly led into more and more of a focus on appearance and eventually a full-blown eating disorder. Jessi shares the story in this podcast with so much vulnerability. She really shines the light on those hidden shames that we keep to ourselves. And I even share some of mine that came up that I'm happy to talk about because I know this is not just me and something that I went through. This is not just something Jessi went through. There are millions of people around the world just like you. If you have struggled with food, if you have felt ashamed of things, I said in the podcast episode, there were times where I used to hide packets of cookies and junk food like behind cushions on the couch because I didn't want anyone around me to see or comment on what I was eating. And yet I felt this pull to consume these foods to manage my stress, to manage my high functioning anxiety. So if you're doing any of that, or hey, you've got some other habit that is helping you cope with the stress and everything you're going through, then you're definitely going to get so much out of this episode. It's for all the perfectionists out there. And there's something about perfectionism that tends to really express itself in focusing overly on our appearance and turning our bodies into these projects. Okay, let's go to the show. Jessi Jean, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to finally chat to you. You've been on my list for a long time to speak to.
Girl, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
Oh, it's beautiful to have you. And you're in your lovely new podcast studio.
Here I am. The lighting's not very good yet, but yep, hopefully the sound works well.
It looks amazing. I want to start us off, Jessi, with just a nice open question. And that is, what do you just wish more women knew?
That's such a beautiful question. I wish more women knew that they weren't alone in the things that they feel so ashamed about. A lot of women are struggling with deep shame from a variety of issues, a variety of challenges, a variety of experiences. And I wish they knew they weren't alone, because so many of us have those dirty little secrets or dirty little parts of our life that cause us to feel so much shame. And I think if we start to bring those things out into a little bit more into the open, into a safe space, we release a lot of the shame that's creating so many of the self-sabotaging cycles many of us get into.
When you said that, my mind started to go back to little moments of shame because we're obviously going to be talking about food and relationship with our body. And I had some memories flash across my mind of hiding packets of cookies and junk food behind cushions in the couch so that my family members wouldn't see and no one would comment, and I could just eat that comfort food without distraction. And I felt so much shame. I've been through that journey too of
Mm,
needing this stuff to cope and
right.
with things I didn't even understand, but at the same time feeling that deep shame. And I know
Mm,
you have your own story, Jessi. Would
mm.
you share with us what did that journey look like for you, and those moments where, when you were just sort of beginning and going through all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. The My story as it relates to food and body image issues really starts from my younger years when I was in high school. That was the first time I started to notice my body. Before that, I just existed in my own skin. I had no concept of whether I was thin or in a larger body, whether I was pretty or whether I wasn't, whether I fit in, whether I didn't. I just existed. I was just a kid until high school. And I know I'm very fortunate for that because many of the women that I work with started to notice their body and deal with body image issues well before that age. But I really started to notice myself and notice my body and start to compare myself when I was in high school. I did gymnastics and cheerleading, and those are very image focused activities. And I was a perfectionist, and my parents were totally well intentioned, but I didn't come from anything. And they told me if I wanted to go to college, that I was going to have to get scholarships because unfortunately they weren't going to be able to help me financially. And so I made it my mission to do everything I possibly could to position myself to get scholarships. And that just set me on this journey of perfectionism in every area, from my academics to athletics to volunteering to, being involved in church groups. Everything I could think of, I just dove in, and I had this mindset that I had to be the absolute best at it. So when I was in gymnastics and cheerleading, I progressed really fast, and I was naturally a very thin, petite girl. But as we grow. When we hit puberty, I started to grow. My body started to change. And I went from being the girl who was tossed in the air to what's called a base, a girl who was lifting other girls into the air. And I remember thinking that something was wrong with me, that I can't believe I let myself get to a point where I could no longer be lifted in the air. And the reality was I was just growing. But another component of that was I was so neurotic about succeeding, and I was such a perfectionist that I started to not sleep like hardly at all. From the time I was a freshman in high school all the way through college, I slept like 4 or 5 hours a night. And as a growing girl, we're going through all these different changes, and I didn't have the energy, and I was grinding. I mean, I would get up at 4 in the morning to study, and then I would be at school at 6 to work out. And then I would go to class, and it was just absolutely exhausting. And then I would study well into the night, and I was doing everything that I could. I was in student government, everything. And I felt like I had to be the best. And because I wasn't sleeping, I needed to get energy elsewhere. So I turned to caffeine and I turned to food. And not only was I growing, but I was also eating pretty unbalanced. And so my body was changing, and I felt so much shame about that. And I remember I started to, all the way through college. I mean, I thought when I was in high school, okay, when I have control, my own food scene, things will get better. It just continued to accelerate through college, to the point where I was stealing my roommate's food, and I was hiding wrappers at the bottom of the trash can. I was pouring water over my food. I would chew food and spit it out. I was taking laxatives. I was trying to do whatever I could to manage my weight, to lose weight, to not eat. But all I thought about was food, whether I should eat, whether I shouldn't. The first thing I would think when I woke up in the morning was, what do I weigh? When can I eat? What shouldn't I eat? How much do I need to exercise to make up for what I ate yesterday? And so, these cycles just continued and continued, and they intensified. And when I was, in high school, college, I really didn't have a term to put around them. It wasn't until probably my sophomore year in college, or maybe even into my junior year, that I really understood, okay, I knew in high school, towards the end of high school, like, I have a problem with food. And I was so embarrassed because I literally thought I was the only one on planet Earth who was doing these things, like hiding and binging in secret, and then feeling so ashamed about it. I thought I was seriously the only person on the planet that was going through this. And,
Yeah.
it's like so isolating.
I've been there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's why that's why I'm so passionate about women knowing, hey, you're not alone. Whatever the shame is, you're not alone. Because I remember feeling not only shame for what I was doing, but shame because I was the only one that was doing it. Like, what's wrong with me was the narrative I had in my head. And it got to a point when I was in college that I started to question whether life was even worth it, because I was so exhausted of the cycles. And that scared me, because as a generally bubbly, happy person, to start having those kind of dark, intrusive thoughts was very, very uncomfortable, very uneasy for me to cope with. And it was at that time, I remember I did whatever I could to put together the money and muster up the courage to put myself into counseling. So I got my first counselor, my first therapist, and it was a therapeutic experience in that we talked about some of my childhood. We talked about some of my insecurities and we worked through these things and we talked about my issues with food. And it was so, I remember the first session I went to, I was so nervous. I was sweating. I was so uncomfortable to tell another human, but I was desperate for help. And I went to therapy for, a year and a half, 2 years. And it, like I said, it was therapeutic, but my binging and overeating and my body image issues didn't change. And that was demoralizing because I had mustered up the courage to put myself in therapy and nothing changed with
Yeah.
my issues with food. And so I thought, well, I'm for sure the outlier. Like I'm for sure the outlier.
Which is again another such a common thought, right? And that we all think that we're the one. I'm the one it's not going to work for. I'm the one that can't get better.
Yeah. And so I had these thoughts and my therapist said, maybe you should try Overeaters Anonymous. And I'm like, what's that? And she's like, well, it's like AA, like Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a 12-step program and there's meetings and, that they're all over the place, just like AA meetings are all over the place. And, I thought, wow, like this is where I'm at in college, considering going to these Overeaters Anonymous meetings. But I went because I was desperate and I was so afraid. I was in this in Fort Collins in at CSU, Colorado State University. And I'm like, I'm for sure going to run into a classmate. Like people are going to see me. I was so embarrassed every time I went to these meetings. They would meet in church buildings or wherever, places where they were allowed to meet. And we would go in and we would sit down. And just like at AA, we would say things like, hi, I'm Jessi. I'm an overeater. My life has become unmanageable. And we would recite these mantras that were very disempowering. And I don't want to put down OA. I know it's helped a lot of people. But for me, it was furthering this identity that I was broken. It was further ingraining this idea that something was fundamentally wrong with me. And I continued to binge and overeat. And one of the things that, just like in AA, one of the things you do in Overeaters Anonymous is you can get a sponsor, somebody who will, be like an accountability person for you. And I remember the sponsor telling me I needed to cut out things that I binged on, things like carbs and sweets and all of the things that I would go crazy on. And I remember doing that. These impulses would intensify for the things that I told myself that I could no longer have. So
Yeah.
again, just another mind game.
The taboo factor. It's like,
Yeah.
if you can't have it, then that's all you want. Or if I say like,
Right.
don't think of a purple elephant right now, that's all you're going to think about.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And so anyways, in college, I went through at the end of college, I went through a pretty devastating heartbreak. I was engaged and he cheated on me and it was just this whole thing. And it pushed me into the gym. I needed to feel something because I was so devastated, so heartbroken. And so I started working out and that's when I started to learn about bikini competitions, fitness competitions. And I started to get this bug, like, you know what? I think if I push myself to do a fitness competition or a bikini competition, I'll finally figure out all my stuff with food. I'll finally get into a rhythm with food and I'll get the body that I want. I'll feel confident. And so I did that. I pushed myself to the extreme to do a bikini competition. And that first competition, I did well. I placed second. And leading up to that, probably 10 days before the show, I flew home. I was living in Miami at the time. I flew home to Denver and I was so emaciated. When I was walking through the airport, I had to hold on to the wall because I was about to pass out because I had eaten so little. My body was so depleted. And I thought, you know what? This is the goal. Like I'm leaner than I've ever been, when in fact I looked sickly. But but at the same time, I was just like in this headspace where it was never enough. So I went and I competed. I got second. And I was told by the judges that the reason that I didn't place first was because I wasn't proportional up top. And that was because I didn't have implants. When you get that lean, when you get stage lean as a woman, you lose a lot of your chest. And most women who do really well in, the bodybuilding world, the bikini fitness world, have implants. And so then I set my mind to go get plastic surgery and get implants. And so this journey is leading me. My food and body journey is just continuing to evolve. And I'm thinking I'm making progress by diving into the fitness world and, getting this body that I've always dreamed of. And yet the moment my competition was over, I went off on a 3-4 month long binge that was more intense than anything I'd ever experienced. I rebounded and gained so much weight back. My eyes looked like I was strung out on drugs because my hormones were so unbalanced following the show. Like I just had glassy eyes, was gaining weight at such a rapid pace, and I could not stop myself from eating. And my anxiety was through the roof. I felt like such a failure. I was so embarrassed. Like, how could I get this far and then gain all this weight back? And the cycles continued, and I continued to compete for the next couple of years. So that's kind of my food and body journey. I know that was long winded, but that's kind of the challenges and the struggles that I went through. And thankfully, I'm not there anymore. I've found my way out of that mental and physical hellhole, but it was pretty intense. And it was this constant feeling of I'm not good enough. I don't look good enough. I need to change my body. I need to control food, but yet food was controlling me. And it was maddening. It was exhausting and just so defeating.
Yeah. And it's such a like understandable cycle. Like when you first
Mhm.
start to understand, it makes sense that, your body is wants you to survive, wants you to have food.
Mhm.
And therefore, when you deliberately restrict, it's kind of in a way going against all our natural instincts to take
Mhm.
that food away and to like over exercise. Everything in our system is saying, like, don't do that.
Yes.
Sleep more, don't go to the gym, just rest, conserve your energy. To have the willpower to fight against that. I honestly think people who've been through eating disorders have some of the most incredible, like, we must see that, like, not that obviously it's healthy, but incredible strength of will to go against everything in your body. But then it's the process of
Mhm.
relearning to like listen to that, right?
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. So much willpower and strength, but what it turns into is obsessive compulsive neurotic behaviors. And it's,
Of course.
there is this beautiful strength within, and that's something I'm so passionate about, helping my clients hone. It's like, hey, you've got this beautiful force within you that's so strong, but we need to hone it in the right way, or else it can turn into these things like obsessive compulsive tendencies, neurotic behaviors, self-sabotaging cycles that we get ourselves into. And it wasn't until, I really started to understand, and I went on my own journey of self-study to understand the neuroscience of behavior change, that I started to work my way out of these cycles that I was in of restrict and diet and then snap and binge. And it's almost like, the more you restrict, it's like I always give this analogy. It's like pulling back on a bow and arrow. The more you restrict, the harder you restrict, the longer you diet. It's like pulling back on that bow, and eventually your arm gets tired and you have to let go, and that arrow shoots forward. And the further you've pulled back, the further that arrow is going to shoot forward, and you weight rebound. Like you said, it's natural for the body. All the body signals are firing. The survival mechanisms inside the body and the brain are firing. And so that's why dieting is so hard, because everything inside of us wants to keep us alive. And so when I started to learn how to work in sync with the brain, that was when I really started to find relief from the binge and overeating. And it was so exciting. And I was so hopeful for the first time in my life that, hey, maybe there's not something wrong with me. Maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I'm not beyond repair. And to go through this process of mentally reprogramming how my brain works and relates to food, and how I relate to my body, and how connected I can become with my body. It was so, sometimes I look back and I think back to when I was really deep in the pit of my disordered ways with food and body. And I think, wow, like where I'm at now was unbelievable. Like I couldn't even believe it when I was so deep in that pit. I thought my neurotic tendencies with food were going to be the thorn in my side the rest of my life. And the motivation I had to not give up searching for answers was this thought that I had that one day I want to be a mom. And I don't think I'd be able to live with myself if I pass down these issues. And I come from a history of addiction, and this is just its own addiction. Food and body image issues are just these addictive cycles. And I thought, if I'm not willing to feel the pain, the generational curses will continue. So I have to stop. I have to feel it. I have to lean into it. I have to stop ignoring it. And I have to be the brave one that says the cycles stop here. I will not pass this on. And it just became this mission I had. I was so committed to finding answers. And when I started to understand, like I said, food and body image issues from a brain based perspective, it gave me so much hope.
I love that because you really shifted your identity from I'm an overeater and that's who I am and this is like
Mhm.
all I am to
Mhm.
no, I'm the one that's going to stop this,
Mhm.
which is so powerful, Jessi.
Mhm.
Do you remember what that like breakthrough moment for you was? Do you remember the day? Do you remember where you were
Mhm.
sitting? What was that like for you when you
Mm.
realized there was a way to change this and you could be someone else?
Mhm. Yeah, great question. Well, first, let me say that, so much of my story is when I look back and I reflect on my story, a lot of it is very foggy. And that used to be a really big insecurity of mine. Like, why can't I pinpoint the day this happened or when this happened? And I recently, actually, just this year, had a bunch of different testing done on my brain because I'm having memory challenges and I've been dealing with this brain fog. And originally, I thought it was breast implant illness. So I got my implants out this year. But I had all this brain work done. I had an MRI done, an EEG test done. And then I spent 3 hours, like 3 feet away, face to face with a neurocognitive scientist who basically did this 3 hour long cognitive test with me. And at the end of it, she said, you know what, I'm going to write up a formal report, but it's very clear to me. You are well below average in memory and recall for your age. And she said, I think it's PTSD. She said a part of our brain tends to can shut off and close down when we've gone through some pretty traumatic events. And I think that's what it is because we did dementia blood work, like all this different testing, and there was no structural damage. There was nothing too abnormal in my blood work or this EEG test. And she said, yeah, I think perhaps we're dealing with some PTSD and we need to do some cognitive rehabilitation and work with a post-traumatic stress disorder therapist. And so uh anyways, being able to pinpoint specifics in my story is very hard for me.
Yeah.
My childhood and even well into my 20s, like there's themes, but I can't locate specific days, specific times. But I know, like, getting back to answering your question, there was this energy in me when I was in college, this looking toward I was constantly looking towards the future, and I was dreaming about becoming a mom one day, and I just kept having this reoccurring thought, and it became enough to prompt me to, one, not give up, because I started to have two options that were kind of ringing in my head, and it was, one, life's not worth living, or two, if you're going to decide life is worth living, then you've got to give everything you have to trying to figure it out, even if you spend your whole life trying to figure it out, because you're not going to pass this down to your kids if you're blessed one day to have them.
Yeah. Yes. I honestly, Jessi, firstly, thank you for sharing such a
Mm,
beautiful, honest answer to that question and
mm,
what you've been through with like your memory, because trauma is so endlessly fascinating in the way
mm,
that it works and affects us and what constitutes trauma. And
mm,
in this case, as you understand it, and what you've said to me, would you say that essentially there was something within you that drove you almost to traumatize yourself?
mm. Yes, I think so. I think it's pretty multidimensional. So I grew up with, and my mom really struggled with alcohol. And so the constant cycles of addiction that I saw from the time I was really young, I, I think within me was activated this survivor mentality
Yeah.
and this, I have to save her because she can't save herself. And so I think I grew up really, really fast. And as an only child, I didn't have siblings to worry about her with me. And so I felt like I have to take care of her. I felt like I assumed the role of parent. And I don't think I realized then how much it impacted my psyche, how much it impacted my system. I'm naturally a very sensitive soul. And it was terrifying for me. For so long before I really understood addiction, I felt as though she loved alcohol more than she loved me. And to feel like that as a child it devastated me. I'm like, why does she keep choosing this over choosing me? And I think I turned to food to try and find something I felt like I could control because I couldn't control her drinking. And then all the experiences that I have had with food were very traumatic because they were so intense physically. I mean, there was periods where I cut out everything besides Mentos, Diet Coke, and string cheese, and that's all I lived on for, like, a month at a time, and, like, I would do these really weird, bizarre things, and, mentally, I would snap, and so that was very traumatic. So, yeah, I think, it first started kinda with how chaotic the home felt, and then it turned into I created my own chaos, and I knew if I didn't solve this, I would be the catalyst for chaos, like I said, in my children's life, potentially.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And
Mm,
that piece about you felt like your mum loved alcohol more than
mm,
you just gave me shivers in that moment, because I know there are going to be so many women listening to this story that are going to feel so validated hearing
mm,
that someone else has gone through something similar, because that is unfortunately not an uncommon story, and it's something
mhm,
that, yeah, does happen. When we look at this idea of trying to make our body into a project, into something that will give us, happiness, what do you think that we're really seeking in that pursuit? Because we know it doesn't make you happy. How many times do we have to hear that story of, like, you will not be happier at a size, whatever it is, 2 sizes smaller, 10 sizes smaller, I don't care.
mhm.
What is it that we're really looking for, Jessie?
Mm. You know, I think in large part, the desire to change our body, the desire to lose weight is really at its core a desire to feel safe in our body, a desire to feel like we're okay, we're accepted, we're desired. And that's a fundamental human need, a need for safety. And so, if whether it's consciously or subconsciously, we believe that changing our body is going to lead to safety. It's going to lead to love. It's going to lead to opportunity. It's going to lead to desirability. Well, then our body becomes a really important project because those are really important things. They're necessary for us to thrive as human beings. And it's not until we kind of shine a light on that limiting belief and start to dismantle it and disassociate, some of these ideas that we can start to find freedom and recognize love, safety, being desired, having, beautiful relationships, having opportunity can happen in the body that you have right now. They can be beautiful in the body that you have right now, even if you still do have a desire to change things about your body. We have to look at what that idea is doing to us and how much it's crippling us. And we have to question if we really believe that that is if that's true. And whatever we believe, the way our brain works is we have our reticular activating system, and it fires, and everything we believe to be true, we find evidence of it in the world to be true. So, I think the best example or the best way to demonstrate this is a little activity I do with my clients. And I have them. And if you're, listening to this podcast, you can do it right now. But essentially, I say, go ahead and just look around your space wherever you at. I'm in a dark room, so I don't have any color to look at, but look around your space. And I want you to identify for the next 10 seconds everything that's red. So you look around, find anything that's red. Do you see any picture frames? Do you see anything on the walls? Do you see anything, a sign, whatever? What's red? All right, now close your eyes. And I want you to tell me what was brown. What did you see that was brown? And you're
I
like,
didn't
I
see
don't
any
know.
brown.
I was looking for red. I was looking
Suddenly,
for red.
suddenly, Jessi, I'm really aware of how much red is in this room, even though as you see it behind me, there's so much white and it doesn't look like a
Yeah.
red room. There's actually a lot of red things in here.
Yeah. You probably took something that was maroon and you're like, yep, that's good enough. That's red.
Yes.
But yeah, so we're like, okay, I don't remember. I didn't look for brown. Now we look around and it's like, do you see any brown in the room? Is there any brown around you? Do you see, a door? Do you see anything that's brown? Well, yeah, there's brown probably. If you look hard enough, there's probably brown around you too. But because you were only looking for red, you probably saw red. And this is how it works with our brain's reticular activating system. Have you ever been in the market to buy a car? Say you want to get a red 4Runner. All of a sudden, you've decided that's the car I want, a red 4Runner. Now you're driving and you see all these 4Runners. Oh, there's a red 4Runner. There's a red 4Runner. Are there any more red 4Runners on the road now? Or are there more now than there were before? No, but you just noticed them because you decided that's a car that you want. Likewise, if you believe that happiness and success and beautiful relationships and opportunity are only found in a smaller body, you know what you're going to see when you go out and you look at social media or you're out and about in the world. You're going to see people in a smaller body with opportunity, love, and success. And it's going to reaffirm your idea that that's how the world works. When in actuality, there's black 4Runners, there's black Escalades on the road. But if you're not willing to see these other things, if you're not willing to start to disassociate from the red 4Runner, if you will, that's all you're going to see. But what if there's a beautiful car that you could get in? Say you want a brand new Tesla, a Model X, and you're like, I had no idea that Tesla existed, and you didn't have to, use gas in your car because all you were focused on is the red 4Runner. But there's this beautiful other option out there. So we have to learn how to work in sync with the brain. And this idea that, safety is only found in a smaller body is really, really limiting.
Yes. And I think it's that understanding, right? There's always something that we're not seeing because our mind is limited just by
Mm-hmm.
default. It is
Yeah.
limited. So there's always
Mm-hmm.
going to be something more. And when I'm in a really limited state in any situation in life, I always think to myself, well, there must be more. There must be something I'm not seeing. And just having that glimmer of like almost like suspension of belief. It's like I can't see it yet, but I know there must be something more because that's the nature of how the mind works.
Mm-hmm.
It's so helpful in those moments. Going back, Jessi, to this idea of like, food, like the way your body looks will give you love and connection. It's brought up for me. I always think whenever I've gone through heartbreak or rejection with men, my default that old thinking comes back in, and I'm very aware of it now, so I just kind of go, oh, there it is, here it is. It's like
Sure.
the old thought pattern. But I used to get really caught in it, and it would just drive that because that belief was so ingrained. And it's so, I think young women, so the reason why this is so insidious is because we haven't yet had an opportunity. I remember being like in high school before I'd had a boyfriend, when it was just like, oh, I hope someone will love me. I hope someone will like see me.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't had those experiences yet of seeing that actually that's not true. And what's actually really beautiful about becoming older and having more experiences in your life is that you realize how silly all of those ideas were, and
Mm-hmm.
that there will be men that will absolutely adore your figure no matter what it looks like, no matter what your size or shape, and it's because of who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And when shifting away from this obsession with how we look is recognizing part of a tool for doing that is beginning to see ourselves as more than a body. We are not objects to be viewed. We are experiences to be had. We're not ornaments. We're not decorations. We're living, breathing, ever changing human beings. Our soul exists in our earth suit. It's temporary. It's inevitable. We will age. Skin will stretch. It will wrinkle. You can't escape it, no matter how much that idea is sold to you. And when we start to place value in other aspects of our life, other aspects of who we are, and we start to see more, we can actually be more than just hyper focused, obsessive compulsive in our behaviors and in, in the way we look and trying to control the way we look. And finding freedom from body image challenges is not about going from maybe hating your body to loving your body. It's going from maybe hating your body to body neutrality to believing you're more than your body. And that's really the goal. And I want every woman I have the opportunity to work with to feel confident in their own skin, but I want them to feel more than that. I want them to believe that they're more than what they look like. And when we get to that belief, we get to that place, we're allowed to go out and live our lives in a more expansive fashion that's so deeply fulfilling. I've been dealing with this stupid rash on my face for 6 months now, and the former Jessi, who was so insecure, it probably would have crippled my career at one point, because I would have been so embarrassed to show up to do podcast interviews, to be on social media. And the Jessi I am today is like, no, I still deserve to go out and have a good time with my friends. And yeah, maybe somebody's going to see it and be like, what is that? But like, so what people think about me is none of my business. And I know that I'm more than this body. And so it's been so transformative in me being able to just live my life knowing that, this is my earth suit. I am more than that. I am valued beyond that. And it's liberating because I no longer have to control food either to try and control my body. I'm able to allow my body to ebb and flow, and it changes. And that's normal.
Yeah. What do you think were some of those starting steps that helped you step outside of my worth is all in my body and how I look into actually my worth is more than that?
Mm, yeah. I was tired. I was exhausted. It was a rat race and I was just tired of it. And there was always somebody that seemed better, prettier, thinner. And I realized if I continue to try and chase that, I will be running the rest of my life. Is that how I want to spend all of my energy? It's our time and our energy is finite. And I was just tired. So I think exhaustion and burnout is what led me to reevaluate.
Yeah. Eventually our life will show us what's not working.
Mhm.
And we're just like, well, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to keep trying to chase this false thing that we know doesn't
Mhm.
bring happiness? Or am I going to choose to, I think for me, I used to think about things like seeing a child just running free at the beach and remembering
Mhm.
what it was like for me to be like that, not a care in the world
Mm.
for my body. And then thinking, why did I stop doing that? Obviously not maybe naked on the beach, but but maybe, I don't know if no one's around.
Yeah.
Like why do we, I remember that very, all enclosing, like suffocating feeling of
Mm.
I'm not safe here to show
Mm.
my full skin at the beach. And then I was like, oh my gosh, but there's so much life to just be enjoyed, and how much freer would it feel to just run around and not care about what's jiggling and not care about what's dimpling?
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think, part of it too is when we're struggling in the cycles of binge and overeating, those are so demoralizing and so defeating. And those really impact our body image. Um, when we can start to make peace with food and find balance with food and reprogram our behaviors around food, the freedom and liberation we start to feel in our body is pretty amazing. Um, when we're engaging in these cyclical self-sabotaging patterns and behaviors, it really chips away at our self-esteem and we become hyper focused on our body. And it's really cool to see what happens in the process of healing, healing your relationship with food. It's been such an honor for me to witness so many women that I work with heal their relationship with food and then subsequently find increasingly more freedom in their body and go out and live far more expansive lives. But part of it too, part of the reason, like I said, that we feel so trapped in our body is because we feel so trapped in our behaviors, and then our body becomes the target and we blame our body.
Yeah. One question I get a lot, Jessi, is, it's one thing for you to have overcome this. This is your career. You've made this your whole focus, your whole mission in life. But what about the average person who's just working, their 9 to 5 job and wants to, like, they've got lots of other stuff going on. They can't make this their full life mindset, everything fully embodied, the approach of, like, self-love, taking care of yourself in every single way. And they see it
Mhm.
as almost unrealistic. And they say that back to me as well. What do you say to that person, Jessi, who thinks, like, you're some anomaly?
Yeah. Oh, I felt that when I was struggling. I had seen maybe some people who had evolved out of their struggle. And I thought, yeah, well, good for them. Lucky them. They go on to write a book about it. Okay. Then, yeah, it was their whole life. Um, the reality is, you're not the outlier as much as you might think that. And what's really cool, you don't have to devote your whole life to healing in order to heal. And in fact, the nervous system doesn't want that. The nervous system likes slow, incremental changes. So diving all in, quitting your job, doing everything, and sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes, you might have to check yourself in somewhere if things get really out of control, and devoting everything you have to healing becomes absolutely important. But for many people, continuing to live life and focus incrementally on making slow and steady changes is so healing for our nervous system. And so the way I approach things is on a minimum effective dose basis. You only need to do what you need to do, which is, for again, this is just for the women that I work with. They come into my program and we do an hour. If we can devote maybe an hour every other day or a few hours a week to intentional mental reprogramming techniques and tools, we're going to see a world of difference in our relationship with food and body. And it's these small changes over time that add up to the big transformation. So
Yeah.
don't be fooled when you see people who you look up to, you see people you aspire to. Don't let that limiting belief of, well, they've made it their career, or they have all this time to give, or they don't have kids, or they have this, or whatever it is. Don't let those limiting beliefs keep you stuck in these cycles. What if, I always say to myself when something feels unbelievable, or I'm really struggling to embody something, I'm like, well, what if, or how can I? Because when we live in the mindset of disbelief and doubt, it becomes a habit. We become addicted to our struggles,
Yeah.
and we need to start shifting the way we perceive what we're going through.
Yes, definitely. And there's
Mhm.
always going to be someone who has been through something just as difficult as you, just as challenging, in a different way, in a different color, version, variety. You hit a really powerful point there. It's those expectations can bite us in the ass, like, in the sense
Mhm.
of, it's got to be perfect and I can't have any setbacks. And, really honing in that idea, it's just those little moments of, deliberately choosing something different day
Mhm.
by day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, how can this be true for me? How
Yeah.
can I make this happen? Whenever whenever my husband and I will catch ourselves saying, if we have something that we're working towards financially, we want to purchase something and we're like, "Oh, we can't afford it." We
Mm.
say, "No," we change our language, conscious language. "I choose not to purchase this. How can I be able to afford this?"
Yeah.
Things like that, changing the way we speak, changing the way we think is really transformative.
Yes, or something like, maybe like, I'm on the way to affording this.
Mm,
Like,
yeah.
I think we've always got to see it as, I'm always growing, I'm always healing.
Mhm,
It's just on a timeline that's out of your hands sometimes.
mhm. Yeah, 100%.
Yes, I love that so much. Jessi,
Mm,
do you ever find even now you'll get triggered sometimes? Like, maybe, I don't know, I grew up with the culture, I'm sure you did too, like magazines and like worshiping these women and those and of models and things like that. Do you ever sort of find that old part of you kind of sees an image like that and goes, oh, whoa, and you sort of feel those old thoughts come back?
I'm fortunately, I feel like I've evolved, um, well beyond a lot of the things that used to trigger me. Now, that's not to say I'm untouchable, because I'm certainly not. There are things that trigger me. There are things that cause me to feel insecure in my body or question things. I think that's just human nature. But
Yeah.
I've worked so hard to develop body image resilience. I like to kind of pivot the understanding of healing our body image challenges from a place of arriving at a place of confidence, to instead viewing it as building resilience to the external triggers, the internal critical mean girl. And I've developed a lot of resilience. And so in the moments that I am triggered, or I'm not feeling the best in my skin, they no longer cause me to sink into self sabotaging patterns. I have developed the self awareness to recognize the thought or recognize the emotion that's rising up in me, and to meet it with acceptance, to meet it with compassion, and to process and metabolize it so it doesn't result in becoming emotionally constipated and feeling anxious, and then, needing to numb out the anxiety with food or whatever it is. So, yeah, there's times where, especially the last 6 months, I took my breast implants out. I got them out. And so the way I looked changed. And I've been dealing with this stupid perioral dermatitis, this rash on my face for 6 months. And so there's definitely moments where I'm feeling exceptionally triggered.
Yeah.
I have these scars on my breasts right now that are healing from the surgery. And so, yeah, there's times where I'm feeling triggered. And yet, I meet the thought, I sit with it for a moment, I breathe through it, and I use some tools to process the emotion. And what's so cool about emotion, when it's processed, it transforms. So I know that, and I've practiced that enough. So I'm not afraid of those emotions. I'm just like, shoot, I hate that I'm feeling insecure right now, or I hate that I'm feeling triggered right now. Let's deal with it. And that's what I'll do. I'll sit down and I'll deal with it.
Yeah. And I think so much of it is just we don't know how to deal with those feelings.
Yeah, we're not taught. We're not taught. And that's the thing too, is I want women to know that, you know, you don't have to blame yourself for struggling with food or struggling with your body or anything else that you're feeling shame for. You are the way you are because of the way that you were conditioned. And that might in part be from your upbringing, from the people you've been around, the environments that you've been in. You've become conditioned by a lot of different circumstances to act and think and feel and behave the way you are. And now, as you start to develop increasingly more conscious maturity and have the ability to do more introspective work, you start to recognize parts of yourself that you're like, yeah, I don't want this. I don't want to continue to create more of this in my life. And that should be super empowering. Instead of recognizing things that you don't like about yourself and sinking into guilt and shame, be proud of yourself for looking at it. Be proud of yourself for saying, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to take extreme ownership over this struggle. Maybe none of us raised our hand and said, I want to have food, eating disorders or challenges with food or body image insecurities. You didn't choose it. So give yourself a little break here and recognize, I didn't choose it, but it is my responsibility to heal it so I don't perpetuate the cycles. And
Yes.
so I think when we meet ourselves with a lot of compassion, it's so transformative.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Jessi, if you could go back and
Mm.
give some word of advice to your past self when you were in your lowest of lows. I know you can't remember it as clearly as you might like, but just knowing
Mhm.
generally where you were,
Mm.
if you could just float
Yeah.
down as who you are now, what would you say to yourself?
Mm. I think I would just take myself by the hands and I would look in my own eyes, and I would just tell her, I would say, Jessi, don't give up. You don't know what you don't know, but here's some good news. There's people who know, there's information that's out there, and it's going to take time for you to understand it, to process it, to digest it, to implement it and integrate it. But it's going to be so transformative. This is not how your story ends. This is not going to be, what characterizes the rest of your life. It's going to end faster than you understand. Just hang tight, breathe, and try and calm yourself down when you get so worked up and you're feeling so stuck. I promise there's a way out, but it's going to take you time to understand it, but it's coming. There's a light at the end of this tunnel. That's probably what I would say.
Oh,
Mm.
that hit me, Jessi. That was so
Mm.
beautiful. I know that's
Mm.
going to hit home for so many people.
Mm.
What a beautiful spot to end our
Mm.
chat. I want
Mm.
to ask you, firstly, I want to say thank you so much for
Mm.
sharing so much of your heart, so much honesty and vulnerability, because that is what heals this shame. It's talking
Mm.
about it, it's sharing these stories. And I just appreciate you so much for that.
Mm.
And I want to ask you, for those listening, where can we find you and what have you got going on at the moment?
Yeah, well, I'm assuming you like listening to podcasts if you're here listening to this show. I also have a podcast, the Dear Body Podcast. We're launching season 2 November 2nd, which we're very excited about. I talk all about overcoming binge eating, overeating, emotional eating, body image challenges. I feel like it's my moral obligation to help women who can relate to my story. I know I can't relate to everybody, but those who can relate to my story, I feel this deep conviction like I have to share the light at the end of the tunnel, really for that former version of myself who was questioning at one point whether life was worth it. So I love the podcast. I feel like that's where I get to express myself most freely. So yeah, the Dear Body Podcast available on all podcast platforms, and then I hang out on Instagram, and I'm trying to learn TikTok to keep up. But on Instagram and TikTok, it's Jessi, Jessi, Jean, Jeann. So yeah, that's where I spend my time, the podcast, and then on those 2 platforms. And then the rest of my time is spent with the women inside the Food Freedom Online program. I help women from all over the world go through this process of mental reprogramming to help them heal their relationship with food and body so they can go out and fulfill their life's purpose and mission, and feel deeply fulfilled without those struggles weighing them down. So yeah, that's where I spend the majority of my time.
Amazing. I'll have links to all of that in the show notes so people can find you nice and
Mhm.
easily. Jessi, thank you so much for the work that you do for helping women overcome such a painful,
Mhm.
stuck kind of place to be in life. It is
Mhm.
just so needed and necessary. And I just want to honor you for that.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much. I hope this was encouraging. I hope it just instilled some belief in somebody who might be struggling.
I have no doubt. And I just want to give
Mm.
you a hug right now.
Yeah, ditto.
It's been so
Virtual
lovely.
hug.
It's been so lovely connecting with you and meeting
Mm,
you. So thank you.
Likewise.
Now, if you've listened to my recent episodes over the last few months, you'll know I've been hard working away on building and creating new content for you, new lessons and trainings to help support you in becoming an anxiety master. For the very first time, access is available for you to sign up and join the Anxiety Masters membership. This is where month by month, we're going to be meeting on live calls. I've got live group coaching, live workshops that I'll be running with themes every month. We're going to be covering things beyond just the Anxiety Reset program. We're going to go even deeper, delving into that space of mastery, that ongoing support, ongoing practice, repetition, reminders, a space to check in, a space to feel like you're understood. You know, this self-development journey can be a bit lonely sometimes when you've noticed the people around you are not on your level, they're not doing their inner work, and it can be so frustrating. This is the space where people get you, where we're going to celebrate taking it slow, going for your big dreams that everyone around you might think you're crazy for pursuing. We're going to celebrate the times where you take a break and you let yourself rest, celebrating moments where you enjoy life, really getting present and building a life that is meaningful, satisfying, and fulfilling to you. When we live in this way, our experience of anxiety is much less frequent, much less intense, because we're living in alignment with ourselves. We are bringing our life into balance on all levels, mind, body, and soul. That is what this space is for, and I'm just so excited to have something to offer where we can all keep in touch, keep working together. I'll be speaking with you, working with you on these live calls. We're going to have monthly breathwork classes too, breathwork healing meditation sessions led by our amazing New Zealand-based instructor, Mary. She is such a beautiful energy to be around. You'll feel healed just being in her presence. There's an exclusive new meditation library with fresh 10-minute meditations for you, and we're going to have special events and so much more. If you know in your heart you already want to join the Anxiety Masters membership, then jump into the link in the show notes. You'll be able to see everything about it there. This is a beautiful way to dip your toe into the water of this work, or continue moving forward on your healing journey if you've already worked with me in the past. Now, for those who want the intensive experience, you want to go through everything, you want to leave no stone unturned, 90 days of working with the Anxiety Reset method, then the program is for you. The Anxiety Reset program is also now available. You get 3 months access to Anxiety Masters, the membership, to have that live experience as well as you go through the program. The program is the space to dive deep, to really nut out the core root causes of your anxiety and get to the bottom of it. Each week we work with a component of your mindset, your physical body, your physical health. We work through gut health, nutrition, hormones. All of it is in the Anxiety Reset program. So if you're totally new to this work, you might like to start with the membership, dip your toe in the water, find out what I'm all about, work with me live, join those live workshops. But if you want the full experience and learn everything there is to know in one space, this is like doing your degree in becoming an anxiety master, then join the Anxiety Reset program. You'll have access to the Masters membership too. And for those who've worked with me already, come join us in the membership. That is the space to continue our work, continue the support. Now I have a way to keep working with you, and I'm so excited to get started. All the information is in the show notes, and I'm excited to work with you if this feels like something you're being called to. The bottom line is, no matter what option you choose, you will become an anxiety master.